when he bought that abandoned 100-year-old mansion. He thought he was saving a piece of history. He restored it with his own hands, spent his life savings, and brought the forgotten house back to life. But just when he finally moved in, the HOA arrived with sheriff at the door, holding a notice that said, "Pay or we'll tear it down." That was the moment he realized he wasn't fighting for a home anymore. He was fighting for his dignity. He had always believed that old buildings carried stories, real stories that people had forgotten. That belief became stronger the day he found a listing for a century-old mansion sitting quietly on the outskirts of a small, historic neighborhood. The house had been empty for years. Most people saw it as a burden, but he saw possibilities, memories, and meaning. It was the kind of place people drove past without even turning their heads. But something in him told him that the mansion deserved a second chance, just as much as he did. The mansion was priced low, far lower than anything in the area. Most buyers were scared away by the warnings. Structural issues, outdated wiring, decayed woodwork, leaks, cracks, and layers of dust that made the rooms smell forgotten. But to him, all that meant opportunity. He wasn't a millionaire, but he had saved carefully for years, doing extra shifts and odd jobs, so that one day he could buy a place he could truly call his own. A place where he didn't have to ask permission to hang a picture or paint a wall. A place where he could finally breathe. He walked into that mansion for the first time with a flashlight in one hand and hope in the other. The floors creaked, the air felt heavy, and the silence settled on him like a blanket, but he felt a connection. The house was old, tired, and worn, but it wasn't beyond saving. So he bought it, signing the papers with a mixture of fear and determination. From day one, he worked on it himself. Every nail, every patch, every coat of paint carried his effort. He cleaned out debris that had been untouched for years. He replaced beams with the help of a local carpenter. He rewired the electricity, installed plumbing, refinished floors, and polished banisters that had once been the pride of the original owners. Neighbors watched him from a distance at first, curious about the man who moved into the abandoned mansion nobody else wanted. Some of them offered help. Others just admired the transformation, and a few wondered how long he would last before giving up. But he didn't give up. Months passed, and the mansion slowly changed from a forgotten relic to a restored historical home that reflected respect, effort, and pride. He paid for each repair from his savings, sometimes selling personal belongings just to keep the restoration going. He didn't complain, didn't take shortcuts, didn't ask for recognition. He simply worked until the house once again looked like it had a soul. By the time he finished, the mansion stood as one of the most beautiful homes in the area. People walking by often stopped to admire it. A few even took photos, saying they couldn't believe how much it had changed. He moved in feeling proud, relieved, and grateful. He thought the hardest part was behind him, but he was wrong. A few days after settling in, he received a letter from the Homeowners Association, an organization he didn't even know existed in the neighborhood. The letter claimed that he owed a large amount of money in restoration penalties, architectural review fees, and historic compliance charges. According to them, every repair he had done without their approval violated their bylaws. He was stunned. No one had mentioned an HOA when he bought the property. No one told him that restoring a privately owned, abandoned home required permission from a committee that had never lifted a finger to save it. He assumed it was a mistake. He went to the HOA office the next morning, hoping for a simple conversation. Instead, he was met with rigid faces and short responses. They told him the rules were mandatory, even if he didn't know about them. They said he should have requested approval before making major aesthetic changes. They claimed he was responsible for bringing the home up to community standards, and because he had done it independently, they were now charging him for retroactive compliance. He tried to explain that he saved the house from being condemned. He explained how much money he already put into repairs, how he followed safety standards, and how he revived a property that the community had abandoned. But they didn't care. To them, rules were rules, unless someone had power, influence, or money to bend them. He went home confused, but hopeful that the issue could be resolved. Days passed, and he continued living his life, unaware of how quickly things were escalating behind the scenes. Then came the moment that changed everything. One afternoon, there was a loud knock on his door. He opened it and found a sheriff standing there, handing him a document with the HOA president standing behind him. The paper stated that he had a limited number of days to pay the outstanding amount, an amount far beyond what he had left in his bank account. If he failed to pay, the HOA would start legal action to declare the property non-compliant, which would legally allow him to order the demolition of his mansion. He felt the ground slip beneath him. After all the work, all the sacrifices, all the hope he poured into that home, he was now being told that they could simply tear it down. It didn't feel real. It felt like someone was trying to punish him for doing the right thing. The sheriff wasn't hostile, but his presence made it clear that this wasn't a suggestion. It was a threat backed by law. The HOA president stood there with a smug expression, almost as if he expected him to hand over the payment on the spot. But instead, he calmly folded the notice, thanked the sheriff for delivering it, and closed the door. That night, he couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about how easily people in power could strip away something meaningful. He had restored that mansion with honest work. He didn't owe anyone an apology for saving a piece of history, yet here he was, treated like a criminal. He refused to bow down. Instead, he gathered documents, receipts of every purchase, inspection reports, property records, and legal papers showing condition of the house when he bought it. He visited a local attorney who specialized in property disputes. At first, the attorney was doubtful, explaining that HOAs had a reputation for being difficult and often won through technicalities. But when he saw the evidence, photos, permits, professional statements, he agreed to take the case. They filed a complaint against the HOA for failing to disclose their existence during the sale, for issuing baseless fines, and for threatening unlawful demolition. The case gained attention in the community. Some neighbors who admired his hard work came forward with statements supporting him. They admitted the HOA hadn't maintained the abandoned mansion for years and had only become interested after seeing how beautiful it turned out. The HOA tried to argue, but their paperwork was incomplete. They had never properly filed their updated regulations. They had never sent notices to the property's previous owners. They couldn't prove he ever received any warnings before the restoration began. Piece by piece, their case fell apart. After weeks of back and forth, the decision finally came. The judge ruled in his favor. The HOA had no legal right to demand money or threaten demolition. The fines were dismissed, and the HOA was warned about misusing authority. He walked out of the courthouse, exhausted but relieved. He didn't cheer or celebrate. He simply felt grateful that justice still existed. When he returned to his mansion, he stood in front of it for a long moment. It wasn't just a house anymore. It was proof that doing the right thing, even when it's hard, still matters. He saved the mansion, but in a way, the mansion had saved him too.